No matter how good something is, or no matter how bad something is, no matter how much you love something or hate it, no matter how long something lasts or how short it lasts, sooner or later it will come to an end. There's a saying that came from the book of Ecclesiastes that talks about how there is a season for all things. There is a time to plant things and to pluck up that which has been planted. There is a time to love and a time to hate. There is a time for war and a time for peace. There is a time to live and there is a time to die. And I think in a lot of ways we go through life experiencing a bunch of deaths. Sometimes these deaths are literal, not metaphorical or figurative. They are literally people dying or someone dying. But other times it's more like that saying that there is a season for something and then the season passes and the thing is no longer needed or no longer there. I think it's easy for certain people, myself included in this, to think about death and to reflect on death and to kind of recognize that one day I will be dead. One day I will no longer walk the earth, and that is the way things are. But one thing I don't think we talk about enough is the concept of seasons, the concept of periods of life or epochs as defined by certain things, such as your occupation, relationships, your living conditions. I think there are so many things that contribute to how you remember something in your mind. Whenever I think about my own past, I can reflect clearly on where I was in life and what I was doing then. And that's kind of how I define the different periods of my life, as I think most people do. I can look back on my own life and I can say, I remember going to school here at this place for this length of time, and that length of time is just one section of my life, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or there are other periods of my life where I can look on them and say, this is the job I was working then, these were the people I knew then, for this length of time, beginning, middle, and end. So I think there are a lot of different things that we can point to in our own lives to define a period. Like I mentioned before, sometimes these periods are defined by literal deaths or literal births. I have a friend who became a father several months back, and for him, his life is clearly split into two halves, before and after the birth of their child. So it's not exactly a happy subject, but I've talked quite a bit about death and decay. I did that Signalis video on decay, and I've talked a lot about death, but it's usually more in a metaphorical sense. But as I've said before, death doesn't really scare me. The thought of being dead doesn't scare me, but the thought of decay scares the crap out of me. The thought of watching things fade away terrifies me. And so I think that in terms of thinking about life in different periods or epochs, I think that it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. I think it's difficult for me to grasp that right now things are a certain way and they won't always be this way. But I struggle a bit with this concept of seasons of life because it's a weird mixture of death and decay, because it's decay in the sense that things change, that certain periods are just kind of clearly defined and marked, but it's also death in the sense that certain periods are final. Certain periods begin, have a middle, and end. And again, I don't fear death. I don't fear the end of things. I find it somewhat difficult to deal with and certainly anxiety-inducing whenever I think about the fact that in 5 years from now, things will be different for me and things will be different for you. I don't know how things will be different for me. You don't know how things will be different for you. Life takes us down strange roads, but it's certainly strange to think that yeah, everything will be different in 5 years. I think there are a lot of people who I know right now who I know for a fact that I will be talking to in 5 years' time. But there are also a lot of people who I know that I won't know in 5 years. I think that in 5 years, I will love a lot of the same things that I love now because, you know, I loved Silent Hill 10 years ago. So I think in 5 years, I'll love it still. Same goes for The Cure or for Nine Inch Nails or whatever else. But also, I don't know what new things will be out in 5 years' time that I will love or that I will hate or whatever. I think that at the core of things, I struggle with the idea that I cannot properly envision the future, and neither can you, because of the fact that so many of the things that will be in the future do not exist now. If you want to look at media, it's like what music or books or shows will exist in 5 years' time that do not exist now. Or it's like if you look at technology, will VR finally be like hugely spread? Will we have a new social media platform? What will things look like in the technology world in 5 years? In 5 years' time, there will certainly be relationships that we go through, or friendships, or whatever else that we just don't even know about. We will meet new people and we will move to new places, and at some point we will let go of old places and old people and old things, and we will have moved into a new period for ourselves. Essentially, I think that you're letting a death happen so that a new life may begin. But again, all things end. All seasons come to an end. And so in 5 years' time, though we may be in a certain season, that season will come to an end. And then a new period of life will begin after that, and then maybe after that, and maybe after that. So with that knowledge in mind, with knowing that everything ends, it's like, what are we supposed to do about it? And the answer, if you know anything about mindfulness meditation or just mindfulness in general, the way that you do that is by just existing in the present. It's by focusing on the present moment and by living in the present and not thinking about the future, because the future doesn't exist. And so if you think about the present and you focus on the present, then that's the best way to live, essentially, because there is no future to think about. Any thoughts about the future are about a made-up future that doesn't exist and will never exist. Things never go the way that I expect them to, and I don't think there's anyone in the world who can accurately predict the way certain events will go. And so I think that's kind of the textbook answer to all my thoughts here, just that, yeah, don't worry about the future, bro. Just stay in the present. Stay in the present. Think about the present. Just breathe in and out. And yeah, that works. It completely works, like 100%. But the thing is, it's hard to sustain. It's hard to keep it up, and it's hard to do it consistently. And also a problem that I find myself running into is that sometimes you're in a certain period and you don't like it. Sometimes you're at a certain point in life and you're like, what am I doing? Whenever I have those kinds of moments, thinking about the future can be helpful because it can cause you to kind of go like, hey, what should I do right now to create this future for myself? What can I do to make things better for my future self? But also staying present has a kind of weird side effect for me, which is that I know that everything ends, and so that kind of taints the present moment for me. There's a line in a Fall Out Boy song that I really love that talks about silver clouds with gray linings, and that is just such a beautiful combination of two metaphors, I think, because typically you hear talk about gray clouds, which means bad times essentially. And then you hear about silver linings, which are the good part of a bad situation. And so the way that I interpret that line, silver clouds with gray linings, is that things can be good, things can be great even, but there will always be kind of a bad element to them. It's really just kind of a poetic way of saying that the glass is half empty. And for me, that's always been a struggle, because whenever I get happy in the present moment, or whenever I feel some sort of joy, whenever I feel elated, I always kind of think to myself, I'm like, this won't last. This isn't forever. This is just temporary. Or I've gotten better about this, but I remember that whenever I first started going to concerts, about halfway through I would get really depressed, because I would be like, wow, I'm having a great time at this concert. And then I would be like, well, we've been here for an hour, so the concert will probably last another 20 or 30 minutes, and then it's just back to normal life. And I'm like, well, that sucks. And I kind of ruined the experience for myself. Or let me know if you've ever had this experience. Have you ever dated someone, and have you ever been super happy in the moment, and then there's just this thought at the back of your mind where it's like, if this goes poorly, this is going to really freaking hurt. Essentially, while you are in the relationship, even though there's no reason to worry, you start thinking about how if things do go bad, you will feel bad. You start thinking about how much you like the person and how much it will hurt whenever you are not together. But yeah, it just goes back to that line for me, silver clouds with gray linings. Everything ends, and I think that being present in the moment is the solution, but also I don't think it's perfect. But maybe even that is a sort of silver clouds with gray linings perspective. It's a good solution, but it doesn't solve every problem. You know, and if you think about it that way, it's like, why can't you just be happy that it solves some of the problems, right? Everything dies and everything fades away. At some point, I will have written my last word. At some point, I will upload the last video on my YouTube channel. I think that even though thoughts of anxiety come whenever I think about the end of certain periods, I think that it's still helpful to dwell on the end sometimes. If for no other reason, I think it causes you to reflect on your life and to kind of say, what am I doing right now? What do I want to be doing? In thinking about how you want to be remembered, in thinking about the ending of a project or the ending of a period, and thinking about what the end goal is for anything, I think you can then properly orient yourself and figure out how to best achieve that goal. And I think that recognizing that everything ends can be somewhat liberating, because you have nothing to lose. And I said this before, particularly in my first Signalis video, that we all die, so you really don't have anything to lose, so you might as well go for what you want. And so I think that even when we are reflecting on these seasons, on these periods of life, I think that we can use this idea that there will be an end to them to kind of fully take advantage of them. If we know that we only have 4 years at a university, if you know that the concert will only last for an hour, if you know that the movie will only last 2 hours, if you know that you will only get to talk to someone for 15 minutes, I think that if you know that every period in your life is limited and you only have a certain amount of time to live in a certain situation with the certain people that you know, then I think that can cause you to take full advantage of them. I made a video over a year ago called Can Persona 5 Replace Real Friends? In that video, I talk about how Persona 5 drops you into the life of Joker, and you are role-playing as Joker essentially, and you get different jobs, and you go out to the movies with your friends, and you hang out with these friends, and you talk to them, and you just live out the life of the character Joker. And so I think this is nice because it presents life in a way that is digestible. It shows you these are the components that you need to have a good life. You need to have some kind of occupation, you need to have something that motivates you and drives you, you need to have friends and a good social life, you need to keep up with your learning, you need to engage with difficult things, and of course the time that you have to play the game is limited. You have a limited amount of hours in the day, so it's not like you can work several jobs in one day. You can work one job in the evening and then that's it. If you want to spend an afternoon reading, then that's what you did. You can't, put down a book in the middle of it and then go see a movie. And so I think because of this realistic time structure that Persona has, it kind of recognizes and shows you that you only can do a limited number of things in the day. But because you know that you have a limited amount of sections in the day, you try to use each one fully. You know that the time is limited, and so because of that, you try to make something of it. And so I think you can apply the thinking for this game to your own life, which that's what you should do, but no one really does it. No one really thinks, okay, I have a limited amount of time to live, or I have a limited amount of time in this period. How do I pack every single day with as much stuff as I can? In a good way, like stuff that you want to do. How do I get as much stuff done that I want to do as possible? How do I have a balanced social life, and how do I have fun on my own? How do I study and learn? How do I work? How do I secret fifth thing? How do I do all these things as best I can and fit them all into the period of time which I have been allotted? I think life obviously ends for sure, but along the way we will experience many deaths in the form of seasons of life changing. Again, people will come and go, jobs will come and go, relationships will come and go, friends will come and go. Certain things will stay the same. And I think you want that. I think you need stability in your life of some form. For me, the idea of things ending is something that is scary, but also it is comforting because I'm at the age or the point in life, whatever, I'm in a period where things just kind of feel stagnant almost. And I know they're not. I know that things are happening, but it also feels like I'm just kind of waiting. I think I'm using my time wisely. I think I'm trying to be as productive and work as hard as I can, but also at the same time, I don't know, I guess that it's probably an age thing, right? Where you just kind of feel like you don't have much of your life put together. And it's not like my life is in disarray. It just feels like I don't have much that is stable. I don't have much that I can point to in 5 years' time and be like, yep, this will still be here. And so because of that, I've spent far too many nights kind of just reflecting on my life and being like, man, will things ever change? Will things ever be different for the better than where they are now? And so if you're like me and if you're wondering about that, I think that the answer is yes. I think that if you're working towards things, I think that you will get them sooner or later. But also, I think there are just certain periods of life where you just kind of have to make do with what you have. And I've kind of had to learn that the hard way, I think. I think in any period of life, I think that there are always things to do. I think there are always people to help. I think there are always things to learn. I think that there is always work to be done. And when I say work, I don't mean like your job. I mean like in your own personal life or whatever. I think that there is always some degree of improvement or advancement that can be attained. And so I think it can be suffocating to recognize that you do live in a certain period of life, but it can also be suffocating if you don't realize that, and if you don't realize that there's an end to all things. I think it's really frustrating whenever you feel like you're toiling away at something and you're not seeing any progress. I think it's really frustrating if you feel like you're putting your all into something, but you haven't seen the fruits of it. And so I guess I just kind of tell myself that there is a time and a season for all things. There's a time for living and a time for dying. And so I guess in conclusion, everything ends and it just is up to you to determine how you see it. Is it silver clouds with gray linings or gray clouds with silver linings? It's up to you. So thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts down below. Have a nice night.